Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 1089. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1089, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to public safety, the second engrossment.
I recognize the member from Pine, Representative Rarick, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 1089 is a bill to allow the sales and use of audible and aerial fireworks in Minnesota. A bill similar to this was passed in the House and the Senate in 2012, but was vetoed by the governor. I realize that the governor and many members have had concerns about this bill, so I have worked hard with staff to address many of these issues and possible resolutions to them. One of the main issues that we addressed was local control. In this bill, it clearly states that a town, city, or township has the authority to limit or restrict the sales or use of fireworks. Another concern was centered around the definition of audible and aerial fireworks. To address this, we tied the definition of audible and aerial fireworks to the APA standard 87-1 on the year of 2001. By doing so, the industry can now change their definition, but that will not affect our law. We would have to come back as a body to change that in law in order to have any different fireworks become legal. One of the concerns raised in regards to this was, why did we use an industry standard rather than the NFPA standard? As I researched this, I discovered that the NFPA standard deals with the structures for facilities where fireworks are sold and manufactured, not the actual construction of the fireworks themselves. So in order to deal with the size of the fireworks, we had to go with the industry standard. Another concern was the use of tents for the sales of fireworks instead of permanent structures. An issue we saw to deal with the nuisance of noise year-round, we decided to limit the sales of fireworks from June 1st to July 10th. And in so doing, we determined that it would be unreasonable to require permanent structures for such a limited time frame of sales. Also considered was the fact that many groups such as the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts use fireworks sales as a fundraising event, and they would have been eliminated from that process if we required permanent structures. Other concerns are based upon the risk of fire and injury, and I do share those concerns. But unfortunately, through legislation, we cannot address some of these from happening. Most of that comes from personal responsibility. Just like many other devices that we use every day, it is up to the user to be able to use the device correctly so that they are not hurt or they do not hurt somebody else. I believe this is the same with fireworks. If we pass this law, one advantage will be in states where these fireworks are allowed, the industry runs personal service announcements to help people understand how to use fireworks safely. So this would be an added benefit for the safety issues if we pass this today. What I would like to ask members to remember is that if you drive around on Independence Day or the weekends surrounding it, you will realize that fireworks are here in Minnesota and they are being used. It is just that Minnesotans are going to Wisconsin, North Dakota, or South Dakota to buy these fireworks. It is my hope that we can pass this legislation so that we will make Minnesota citizens legal when they use this, and the state of Minnesota will collect the revenue from the sales taxes for this. So I would appreciate your support, members, and thank you very much.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Rarick moves to amend House File number 1089, the second engrossment, as follows, and the amendment is coded A10.
I recognize the member from Pine, Representative Rarick, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as we were going through the committee process, we discovered a little detail where novelties and sparkling devices were mixed up as the bill was drafted. This amendment makes that correction so that we are regulating sparkling devices but not novelty devices.
Further discussion on the Rarick amendment? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adoption of the Rarick amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Khan moves to amend House File number 1089, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Khan, to introduce your amendment.
Yes. Mr. Speaker and members, I move adoption of the amendment. We've heard a lot of discussion in this body about how important it is to have things that are made in America, sometimes even specifically made in Minnesota. What this simply does is move to encourage the sale of fireworks that are made in America, and if other states do this, perhaps that will be an industrial expansion of the business, of a business which I think is somewhat dubious, but if it's a business that people think are profitable, we should certainly profit for. So I move adoption of this amendment.
There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Rarick moves to amend the Khan amendment to House File number 1089, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A12.
I recognize the member from Pine, Representative Rarick, to speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I do appreciate the intent of the amendment. I agree that we should be encouraging manufacture of many things in the United States. Unfortunately, at this time, we just do not have fireworks available that are made in the United States. Last year, only 6% of the fireworks that were used in the United States were manufactured in the United States. I would hope that this does, in fact, encourage some manufacture of fireworks in our country and hopefully even Minnesota. But right now, I believe we should ask our sellers to look for them, but only require them if it is reasonable. The other amendment is not encouraging it, it is requiring American-made, and although I appreciate it, I would ask that you would support my amendment to the amendment.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Khan, to the A12 amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, I oppose this amendment because this amendment does nothing. It just allows them to go on exactly the way they want to go on. We must move forward in a positive way if we want to encourage American industry and Minnesota industry. So as I can kind of count in this House, and I wouldn't be surprised if this A12 amendment went on. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to withdraw my amendment.
Representative Khan withdraws the A5 amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 1089, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 1089 as amended. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, you'll be receiving 3 pieces of paper from me. One is a photograph of the tent fire that we heard testimony about, where a mother and her son were caught in the tent. That's a color photograph that you should each be getting. There also is a letter from the Fire and Burn Prevention Consultant for Regents Hospital and the Burn Center, who also talks about the property damage loss as well as the injuries that result as increase in fireworks occurs. And then you also have a letter that's coming out from the League of Minnesota Cities talking about their opposition to this bill. And you all know that the governor vetoed this bill the last time around. So who's opposed to the Class C fireworks expansion in Minnesota? There's a long list. The Minnesota Chief of Police Association, the Fire Chiefs Association, the Insurance Federation, Children's Hospitals and Clinics, Regions Hospitals, American College of Emergency Physicians, Minnesota for Safe Fireworks, Minnesota State Fire Department Association, and the list goes on and on. Members, one of the things that we know is that with the increased use of fireworks, you also see increased harm, increased hospital visits, as well as increased damage. Minnesota has seen significant harm to our community property as well. In 2009, Carlos Avery burned 2,700 acres, about the size of Lake Phalen and White Bear Lake combined. 30 homes were evacuated. Thankfully, none of them were destroyed. The cause was from shooting bottle rockets into a field. Governor Pawlenty signed an executive order for the National Guard to come out and assist local fire departments. The cost to taxpayers was in the tens of thousands of dollars. In 2010, Isanti County grass fire was caused by fireworks. 90 acres burned, came within a yard or two of homes. They were saved by the DNR, planes dropping water. It took 5 fire departments, some working overnight, to respond to this incident. In 2011 in the metro area, there was a neighborhood townhouse garage fire about 1 o'clock in the morning, again from fireworks. 2 of 4 detached garages were on fire, and it created a dangerous situation. It took firefighters from 3 stations to put out that fire, stopping it from spreading to even more property. In 2012, in the Litchfield area, a fire burned 250 acres. It took the response of 6 fire departments, as well as having the U.S. Fish and Wildlife responders called out. In 2014, a Zimbrota business suffered vast damages after 2 teens brought a large area of fireworks in Wisconsin and set them off. The owner of Agritech Industries was inside the building when the fire was reported. He did escape without injuries, but 3 of 4 of his buildings were deemed a total loss. And firefighters spent 3 hours putting out the fire, which caused $1.3 million in damages. And insurance did not cover the full amount. So incidents may be down, but the cost is up. Nationwide, the property damage cost due to firework fires was $32 million. There were 17,800 fires started by fireworks in 2013. Fireworks cause fires. Expanding legal fireworks to include bottle rockets and other aerial devices would expect to cost the state additional money. You've now received all of the handouts of those who are opposed. Members, in my day here at the legislature, I have voted for some fireworks. I have not been a person who has been absolutely opposed to fireworks. But members, this proposal is not like Wisconsin's. This actually goes much further. In Wisconsin, you're required to have a permit. You need to specifically say when you're going to light them off. You need to specifically say where you're going to light them off. That's not required here. This is about the fireworks that are sold in tents. This isn't about fireworks that are sold in your big boxes. And insurance is an issue as well. Previous testimony said that you couldn't require more insurance for someone selling fireworks than you could for someone selling children's clothing. I think there's a difference in the risk for someone selling children's clothing versus selling fireworks. So members, you have all the information. The governor vetoed this bill previously, and I would encourage you to vote no.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Members, we have a historic day here today for Minnesota. We have a chance to pass the Fun and Freedom Act. The list that you see of the people that are against fireworks in Minnesota, the list of people that just don't want to have fun anymore. The fire chiefs have always been against any kind of fire. Trust me, back home, your constituents want this. When's the last time you were at a 4th of July celebration and didn't see fireworks going up all over the horizon? I sit in Vernon Center and out in the highway in my motorhome and my lawn chair and with a few beers and watch fireworks go off all over town. And you know what is done about it by the police? Nothing. Most of the police chiefs I knew said, don't go looking for trouble. Let people have fun. Only if someone gets one where they shouldn't and somebody makes a formal complaint. So anyway, half the states that allow this haven't burned to the ground. They're still out there. And you don't have anything to fear from your voters for voting for this Fun and Freedom Act. And I sure hope you'll support it. Thank you.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So I'd be remiss if I didn't get up and speak a little bit against this bill. And Representative Hillstrom, you did an excellent job, I have to say, of articulating your points, and you probably cut my remarks about 2/3. So good job. But I want to talk a little bit, and Representative Corners kind of hit a little bit on what I want to talk about. I understand the freedom side of this, right? I mean, the town that I live in, the city that I live in, you know, fireworks is out of control, and they're illegal. And on the 4th of July, there's no way that the police can keep up to it. It's just absolutely impossible. And we all understand that. We do our best to work around it. I spent 26 years in public safety. I've been, you know, 4th of July is one of those really challenging nights to work because you just never know what's going to happen. I've been to garage fires, house fires, apartment building fires, all the cause of illegal fireworks. And I get the response, you know, I understand it, that, you know, people are doing it anyway, we might as well just legalize it. But Representative Rarick in his comments, one of the things that I picked up on was that he says we cannot address through legislation potential harm to citizens of Minnesota. And that's just not true, members. If that were true, we would let people drink as much as they want and get in your car and drive wherever you want to go. But we as a state have recognized that that's a serious problem, that creates harm, it kills people, it increases property damage, it increases property insurance rates. I mean, the list goes on of all the things that we regulate in state statute that harm people. But I understand the reason why you're bringing this forward. I get the whole freedom thing. What I don't understand is that you don't have any supporters. I mean, the list is long of the opponents of this, and it's been passed out a couple of times now. And we already know the governor's not going to sign this into law. So this is really an exercise in futility. And we got 6 weeks to go in this session. We haven't passed a tax bill from last year. We haven't passed a transportation bill from last year. We haven't seen a bonding bill yet. All these things that we should be working on behalf of Minnesota remain unknown. But we're going to take up a bill and we're going to debate it and we're going to pass it off this House floor that's headed for a certain future. And it's not going to become law. But the point that I really wanted to make, members, and I debated with myself about how I best articulate this. And I'm going to refer back to last session when Representative Marquardt so eloquently used the example of little Johnny, right? You remember him? It's our friend, right? Poor little Johnny was subject to really horrible education policies and lack of funding and all those things. But I have been to little Johnny a number of times over the years, and I'll bet there's other people in this chamber that could relate to this story. I have been to the little kid with the bottle rocket that went off and hit himself in the eye, okay? Blind in one eye. I have been to the young child that, with a brick of firecrackers in his hand, blew his fingers off. I have been to, I can't tell you how many injuries because of fireworks and the improper use, and the reality is, yes, we have lack of supervision. That is a key factor. But putting these things and making them legal is not the answer. This is only going to compound our problem statewide. So members, I would just encourage you to use a little bit of common sense. Let's get back to the business that Minnesota expects us to do and not just pass bills that are, facing an absolute certain death, because it's not going to become law.
The member from Dakota, Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Rarick, the chief author, yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Rarick, we heard mention here that the governor is going to veto this, or that it's not going to go. The governor vetoed it last time. What's been your conversation? Has he changed his mind?
The member from Pine, Representative Rarick.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, I have not approached the governor yet. I have been taking the approach that we need to work and get it through the House and the Senate first. Once that has been done, I will speak to the governor. I did just find out recently that after the press conference I had, the governor was asked again, and he was not aware that we had changed the language and that there are new provisions in the bill. So I am looking forward to an opportunity, once we get it through the House and the Senate, to be able to sit down and explain to the governor what the changes are and why they have made the bill better than what it was last time.
Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Rarick. I suspect that it may have helped if you would have visited with the governor. I'm not 100% sure either, but it seems odd that we would spend time talking about fireworks again. I expected there to be fireworks on the House floor. I just didn't expect it to be fireworks. I thought it'd be fireworks about transportation bill or tax bill or the bonding bill. And Representative Cornish, I am absolutely pro-fun and pro-freedom. But I don't normally do this. I do normally read these, but I don't normally read from them. And my apologies ahead of time for reading a paragraph. You got a letter here from Dan Bernardi, who is the fire and burn prevention consultant at Regents Hospital. And I just ask you to take a second to look at that, because he talked about 2002 and 2008, Minnesota allowed the use of certain non-aerial consumer fireworks. And during the decade before versus the decade after, look at just that one line where he talks about the difference. And then, Representative Rarick, this is actually to you if you'll yield. I just am anticipating or questioning what you think the next decade is going to hold. But Mr. Bernardi from Regents Hospital, he notes in here that since 2002, we've seen a 111% increase in injuries, with 52% of these injuries happening to people 19 years of age and younger, and 22% of the injuries to children 9 years of age and younger. Minnesota property damage has also, from fireworks, has also increased during that same period from $908,000 to nearly $5 million, about a 500% increase. And in fairness, rather than just make the bold comment that I think this is going to cause a lot more injuries and a lot more property damage, I want to give, if he'll yield, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman will yield.
I really am very. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. Earnestly, I'm looking forward to hearing what your response is. Do you anticipate that there will be additional injuries and property damage like there was the last time that the ban was relaxed further?
The gentleman from Pine, Representative Rarick.
Mr. Speaker, Representatives, over the course of the last year, as I've been doing my research, that was one of the areas that we focused a lot of our attention on. You mentioned the statistics of the number of children under the age of 10 that are injured by fireworks. What we discovered is 80% of children under 10 are injured by sparklers, something that's already legal here. This bill has no effect on that. We've also seen that a large number of the fires are started by the spark-emitting type ground-based, which are already legal. What I have basically anticipated for Minnesota is we would see similar things that happened in Indiana. In 2006, Indiana did something very similar. They had spark-emitting type fireworks that were legal, and they went to audible and aerial fireworks. For the first 2 years, they did see an increase in injuries. Since that time, their injuries have actually gone down to a level lower than what they were prior to expanding fireworks. That is, I feel, due to a couple of different reasons. The industry is making safer and safer fireworks. So we see the boxes that come with multiple tubes in them. You light a fuse once, you step back. The box is far more stable than the old launch tubes, so they're going where they should be instead of tipping over. So they're becoming safer. And The fireworks industry then runs public service announcements to help educate people on how to safely use the fireworks. So I do share concerns of injuries, but I would anticipate that we could see the same results that Indiana had by actually seeing injuries decrease by doing this over a course of time.
The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if the Chief Author will yield for one final question, I'd appreciate it.
The gentleman from Pine will yield. The gentleman from Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Rarick, what distance will the authorized fireworks in your bill, how far will they travel versus under current Minnesota law?
The gentleman from Pine, Representative Rarick.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, can you clarify, are you speaking to fly into the air?
The gentleman from Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Rarick, your bill authorizes aerial fireworks. How far will they travel? How far into the air would they travel versus what is allowed under current Minnesota law?
Gentleman from Pine, Representative Rarick.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, currently the spark emitting type will go maybe a maximum of 15 feet into the air. It's a shower of sparks. The type that we would be allowing, the height would depend on the size. Your typical bottle rocket is probably going to go 50 to 75 feet into the air, and then you will have the type that launch from tubes, and they could go anywhere from 25 to almost 100 feet into the air, depending on the size. But that would be about the limit of what these would do.
Gentleman from Dakota, Representative Atkins.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I really do appreciate that. I didn't know the answer, Representative Rarick, but I'd suggest to you that when you've got a device that explodes that can travel 10 times as far as under current existing law, that there's no way that you're not going to see greater injuries, not just in frequency, but in severity. So while I'm pro-fun and pro-freedom, I'm also pro-fingers and pro-eyes. And I don't think this bill is very good for protecting people's eyes and fingers and lives. I would agree with the Minnesota fire chiefs, police chiefs, and physicians that this is not a good bill to pass in Minnesota, and I'll oppose it. Appreciate if members would join me.
Discussion to the bill. The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, today we have fireworks and fantasy gaming, which is appropriate because fun and games seem to be the priorities of this House Republican caucus. Not student debt, not burdensome child care costs, not roads and bridges. Those are issues where you've made zero progress. With 6 weeks left in session, members, I think that it's time we get serious about Minnesota's future. That's not today.
Discussion. The gentleman from Pine.
Mr. Speaker, members, thank you for the consideration of the bill. One thing I would like to just touch on, fires were brought up and the risk of fires. Remember, as we look through the statistics, drought conditions are one of the major factors that apply to fires, and this bill allows local jurisdictions such as a county under drought conditions to restrict the use of fireworks. So we do believe that we're addressing a lot of those issues. Another point was brought up about insurance not being able to exceed certain levels. Those levels are based upon similar industries. So this is not going to be, we can't expect them to pay more insurance than a clothing store or a toy store. This would be to other industries that are similar to theirs. I appreciate your consideration, and I would really appreciate a green vote. Thank you, members.
Discussion. The clerk will take the roll on the bill as amended. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll.
Speaker?
Clark votes no. There being 73 ayes and 56 nays, the bill is passed and as amended and its title agreed to.